our time scale. We talk about each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people like that. People like hearing the real story of their hostess people.
Yeah.
I'm just making up words.
That's okay.
Yeah, well, Melissa, today we have another episode of Common Sense Medicine. Our last one was a hit. Up to 4,000.
Oh,
I
my
checked.
goodness. I mean, who knew?
Yeah.
Who knew?
Who knew that inability to get a medication would cause this much panic? But hopefully, if people haven't heard it yet, go back and listen to it because we have a lot of tips. But there are tips that address what that medication does. So if anyone didn't listen, it was on Ozempic, it was on the weight loss shot. That thing does things to people's bodies, but there are things you can do for free that can do the same thing.
Yes.
Yes. But today, Melissa, we want to talk about exercise. I know we've talked about it before, but there was a recent paper I was published in the journal Circulation that asked the question, can you exercise too much?
I mean, I think for the general population, I don't think anybody, in general, most people wouldn't be in danger. But yeah, I mean, some of your like ultra athletes and things like that maybe could be at increased risk. So yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about, again, the benefits of exercise beyond physical activity. We have a lot of data on that, so we'll bring that out. We'll talk about how to measure exercise, because we had a couple of patients bring up things this week that I didn't realize needed to be clarified, but it's helpful when we talk about that. And then we had a Facebook poll. And so we'll talk a lot about their view and how people actually got their health better. And then we'll talk about us, Melissa.
Yeah.
Yeah, things that we do.
Yeah.
Because we relate, right? Look, hey, we're working, we got kids, we got spouses, we got all sorts of things happening. How do we find time to get things done?
Yes. And that way, we don't just, talk the talk. We do the things that we recommend everybody else does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is important to us. That's why we want it to be important to you.
Yes.
All right, Melissa, well, let's talk about this. So there's a paper that was published recently in Circulation talking about elite athletes. All right. So we want to know that what is the proper dose of exercise? And there's this thing people talk about called a J curve. So everybody knows the letter J. You write it all the day in kindergarten. The idea is when you're completely sedentary, your chance of death is high. Actually very high. When you start having some activity, it will actually go down. Actually pretty good, significant reduction. But then there's a point where it actually starts going up again. So we call it almost like the Goldilocks phenomenon, right? There's a not too hot, not too cold, just perfect. Well, we all know about the sedentary stuff. Yeah, if you're sedentary, no bueno. We're going to talk a lot today about that optimum range, which varies per person. But the high range, and it's specifically what's happening with these people is a couple of things. They were finding more heart arrhythmias. So people were having more issues with their heart rhythm, which is not always a good thing. And number two, on scans, they might have arteries that aren't as healthy as, say, someone who is moderately exercising. But Melissa, let's define something. What are these people who are exercising too much?
Well, I think these are like your maybe Olympic type athletes, ultra marathoners, Tour de France,
Not most of us.
not the general population. And that's what, I think if people saw this article this week and, made any rash decisions about, I don't need to exercise as much. Really, for the most part, you're probably exercising just fine. If you are exercising, yes. So just keep it up.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Melissa. I think, I saw it, and I think this was on like a CNN article. I talk about this. The take-home point is I don't want anyone to think that, oh, shoot, well, I guess I better not exercise anymore, because you're exactly right. These are elite Olympic. These are the Michael Phelps of the world that are swimming like ungodly amounts of time. We've also always had some thoughts that maybe, sometimes with people who are exercising at this level, there is almost like an addiction type, right? It's kind of like I'm addicted to, because no sane person will go out and bike, 300 miles. But these guys almost have a little bit of addiction to it. So sometimes they won't recover as well. They might need a break to let muscle, but they won't do it. They might push themselves beyond the limits. They might do supplements. They might do injections. They might do medications that the general population doesn't do to get themselves to that peak performance. When they get sick, instead of resting, they keep pushing. And so there are behaviors beyond exercise in this people's personality group that might put them at higher risk of bad outcomes.
Right. And they have more on the line. For a lot of these people, it may be their job,
Right.
to perform at a certain level. So they may go to more extreme measures to make sure they, reach their best performance speed or weight or different things like that. Even, the female athlete triad, as far as like really restrictive diets and low body fat percentage can cause adverse health effects
Right.
and bone loss and different things like that. So there's more on the line for a lot of these athletes, but then that can also be to a detriment if not done carefully.
Right. And again, you brought it up exactly like Melissa. Some of these female athletes, I mean, their body fat is so lean, hormones start changing, right? And so they lose their cycle, and all these things can happen. And we don't always know what exactly that does to the body for 20 years or 10 years. Yeah, maybe for high school, but I think. Well, the take-home point is these like elite athletes, it's more than just the exercise time. These are different types of people than, say, me and you who are just trying to be able to keep up with the kids on the soccer field, right? This is a different type of person. So with that being said, the take-home point, this article is not meant for you.
It's not really intended for the general population.
Right. Because on the flip side, we've had many studies showing that on average, and this was actually a Finnish study, that show that people who exercise regularly have a 2 to 4 year longer lifespan than the average population of Finland, which again, they're already pretty healthy. All right. So their average population is not like our average population. It's probably even bigger here. You start thinking about exercising, controlling metabolic disease, controlling diabetes, controlling heart disease. I mean, the list goes on and on. The benefit here is huge.
Right. Yeah. And if you take a population that's just more sedentary at baseline, which we are, we've talked about how we've basically engineered exercise out of our daily routine.
Right.
We drive everywhere. You can barely find a sidewalk half the time, if you did want to walk somewhere. So when you're looking at a really sedentary population, the people that are exercising are definitely going to do a lot better. Whereas some populations have a lot of activity at baseline.
Right.
And then so extra exercise on top of that is just, even more of a bonus.
Yeah, which we'll actually bring up next week because we have a guest.
Yes, we're going to talk about non-exercise physical activity. So just the regular daily activity that we should have at baseline.
Yeah. And I think, when our special guest comes, she's been all across the world. And if you travel any across the world, you start realizing that actually we in America, we're very sedentary, especially in Mississippi where we don't have really a big city. Me and another patient, she was an architect, and we were just talking about city planning and things like that. And really, the only place that you could still walk everywhere is probably Fondren.
Yeah.
Like everywhere else, like Madison, if you bike, you're risking your life. We're just not built like that. But there are things that we can do to increase those activity times for people who are busy, who don't have time to actually have formal exercise, that we can do to just get everything better. Yeah, but like we said, Melissa, things like, of course, with exercise, heart disease, diabetes, we have studies showing all-cause mortality. So all-cause mortality is a very interesting metric. It's essentially anything that kills you. Car accident, lung cancer, all these things. And exercise improves all those things. Now, there's some debate as far as, is it the fat cells shrinking the problem, or is it the insulin resistance, the metabolic stuff? The insulin resistance is lower, the diabetes lower. That's why cancer rates are lower and people who exercise. All these metrics. But the message at the end of the day is we have to find a way to incorporate this into our life. Right.
There's a definite correlation between exercise and reduced risks of all those things that you just listed and more. And, there's just no denying it that, it's good for everybody.
Yeah. Which brings us to the next thing. We're going to say something, Melissa?
No.
Oh, okay. Which brings us to our next thing, Melissa. How do we measure exercise? And I'll start off by telling you a story. So we had a patient this week telling me he's really started walking about a mile a day, which is amazing. It's awesome because he was completely not doing anything, but he really hadn't seen any changes in his body, which is okay. You know, we're just starting. But when I started asking more like, well, tell me about this mile. How long does it take for you to walk? He's like, oh yeah, it takes about an hour. And I was like, wait a minute. That's like a stroll. And it's fine for mental health, right? For being outside, for being in the sunlight, for breathing fresh air, for your mood. That's all great and dandy. But for metabolic health, it's not exactly what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of people probably have heard just the moderate, vigorous, physical activity levels and kind of how to judge those. If you want to get a little bit more specific and like how to actually measure some of those, METS is something to look at, and I'll let you explain it a little bit more. But, as we're kind of explaining this, keep in mind that don't get caught up over calculating your METs of your physical activity.
Right.
When we're talking about, say, a moderate physical activity, a good kind of, test for it would be, say, if you're walking at kind of a brisk pace, can you still carry on a conversation without losing your breath completely, but you feel breathless enough where you have to take some pauses? That's a pretty good indicator that you're at a kind of a moderate intensity for your body type. More vigorous activity, like if you're running and you can't really carry on a conversation without being really choppy, that would be more in a vigorous range. So, those are kind of some easy ways. The METs are kind of a good, more detailed explanation, but, don't get caught up over having to, measure, calculate everything you do.
That's it. That's right.
That's the take-home point.
We got a lot of take-home points today. No, you're exactly right, Melissa, because, right, if you get too caught up in the science of it, some people, you hear things like, I measure my VO2 max. I measure all these things. I measure my glucose at every second of the day. You can get kind of caught up in the weeds. But I liked your way, Melissa, of noticing how you're breathing and you're talking and use that as a metric of how hard you're going. And that will actually improve. Well, that will change with the fitter. Like the fitter you get, that changes, right? So that just means you have to adjust your intensity the fitter you get to that same level of exertion.
Exactly. Yeah. A brand new runner, running, say, a 10-minute mile, that's going to feel very vigorous. But someone who is a very seasoned runner, a 10-minute mile is their like easy day. It's their rest run or whatever. It's just kind of more of that moderate intensity level for that person. So it's very individual.
Yeah. Well, and you still run pretty regularly, Melissa. And you've done like marathons and long runs like that. Well, I guess how far do you usually run now?
Not as far as I used to. I'm not really long distance, but usually anywhere from 1 to 3 miles. Yeah.
I gotcha. Okay. And you've also noticed, like, obviously you've been doing it for a while. What gets you to breathlessness is different than, say, 5, 10. Well, I guess you're running marathons, like before you started running versus now. Right.
Well, and anytime I've had to take any time off of running, I guess, whether an injury or some other, life event, when you're easing back into it, definitely that first mile isn't going to feel like it used to, so you really have to kind of work your way back into it.
Yeah. I understand that, it's just, we're not 18 anymore. Well, yeah. So going back, and we'll talk a lot about our personal experiences, but a MET, right? The key of talking about METs is, it's like currency. It's like money. So certain things require more METs. Certain things require more exertion. It stands for metabolic equivalent time. And so, what I thought was helpful is just listing things to help people understand what the METs, to better categorize what I'm doing. So, one MET is sitting at your table doing nothing. So that's just baseline equivalent. You haven't done anything. And so these are some things that are considered light METs. So these are less than 3. So This is like playing cards is 1.5. Strolling at a slow pace. So for the guy that was just walking, an hour, that's 2 minutes. Washing dishes is 2.2.
Okay.
Yoga, the one that you teach, Melissa, is a 2.5.
Okay.
Fishing. So sitting there on a boat. Yeah. 2.5. I guess you have to pull the arm every once in a while. You got to throw the reels. But that kind of helps you better understand, like, okay, this is, people are like, hey, I exercise, I go on a boat and go fishing. And I was like, okay, well, that's considered light med. The moderate
You
med.
have to fish for a lot of hours to meet your weekly med.
That's right. Yes, which we'll talk about. Right.
Which I think some people wouldn't mind.
That's what I said. Melissa, you might empower a bunch of husbands. You're like, hey, honey, doctor said I can go meet my meds fishing. I'll be gone for 8 hours. Yeah, I'll be in trouble. I can see it now. 3 to 6 minutes, these are moderates now. So these are things like housework. And so housework being like cleaning and sweeping, weight training with light weights. This is like a 3.5. Golfing. And all right, and this is golfing with walking and pulling your clubs. So this is not like
This is not golf cart golfing.
That's right. So that's a 4.3. So for the guys who love to golf, if you want to find a way to add exercise, carry your clubs around and walk the course. Brisk walking is 5. Weight training. So this is heavier weight training, which you've been doing, Melissa, going beast mode. This is 5. Yard work. This is another one. A lot of guys say, I do a lot of yard work, right? But this is mowing, like out there push mowing, moderate effort. So this is a 5. So this is not on the 0 turn.
No. Just because you're outside and sweating does not make it exercise.
That's right.
So yeah, if you've got a push mower, then yeah, that'll count.
Yeah. And again, if you want to, look, you're like, I'm going to be mowing my grass anyway, get out there and push that thing. And yes, you will be sweating and you will burn some calories doing stuff like that. And then swimming laps for fun is a 6.
Okay.
Now your vigorous mets, so these are the ones that people like, hey, I want to do more high intensity things. I really want to push myself. This is walking at a really brisk pace. So this is a 6.3. So that's kind of like 4.5 miles an hour. That is a little bit above 15-minute miles walking. So you're like at 12-minute mile mark walking, which is, that's kind of.
I would have to run.
Yeah.
like a jog. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you move your feet that fast?
I was thinking of those Olympic walkers that like their hips are really swiveling.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a 6.3. Bicycling flat is an 8. Circuit training. So this is your P90Xs, your CrossFit people with minimal rest. So you're kind of going, that's an 8. Tennis is 8. Oh, look at this. Shoveling and digging ditches. Again, not with a little machine, but actually out there shoveling is an 8.5. Soccer is 10. Well, that's impressive because our kids are out there hustling.
A lot of running.
Yeah. And then you're running at a 7 mile per hour pace. That's 11.
Okay.
Yeah. So that kind of gives you an idea. So when people are saying, hey, I'm exercising, this will help you kind of categorize what you're doing. But also, I like your rule of thumb. Just look at how you're breathing.
Yeah, because it'll be different for everybody. You know, even the running at a certain, like the 7 miles per hour, that may not be all that hard for like a really elite athlete.
Right.
But for the general population, that's pretty hard. So
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't know. Yeah. I used to be a runner and now I'm not. I think when me and Jen were dating, I was running to impress her.
Yeah.
Because she was a runner, and now I'm like, oh, just a dad. No, but we do other things. But I like what it says. I think most people say we shoot for 150 minutes of exercise. But if you're walking at, an hour per mile pace, that's not enough. So another way to look at it is about 500 minutes per week.
Okay.
So and each, like the 11, the 10, those that we talk about, those are 10 per minute. So to try to shoot for 500 a week is pretty good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So now, Melissa, we have actually done a poll. So, okay, this is all related because for people who are exercising, we're super happy. We want you to keep going. We want you to push yourself, keep that fitness level, challenge yourself, right? But for people who haven't started anything, who are like, which we hear regularly, right? I don't have time. I'm tired when I get home. I get up super early to go to work. I'm super stressed out. I just don't have any interest. We want people to start. And we actually did a poll. So we're like, for people who've started something new, what made them start? And we've had things like your physician told you to, encourage you to, social media, maybe a podcast, Instagram post. You yourself noticed something different, friends making you go, TV ad. And behold, number one is self-motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It had to be their idea, had to be their own motivation.
Yeah. And physician, we're like last. I'm like, dang
It
it.
doesn't matter what we say.
Yeah, Melissa, we just don't have as much influence. But yeah, social media was second. So I was like, what if a physician on social media
There you go.
told you? No, and I think take home point, we're using that word today a lot. It's like you have to want to do this, right? You have to decide to do this, which is, and we don't know exactly what the switch. Like I think you told me this week, a patient was like fatty liver. That caused a switch.
That was the one. But yeah, had previously or is still diabetic, and that didn't really, trigger any type of motivation to exercise or make any major lifestyle changes, but a diagnosis of fatty liver, and they were like, well, I need to change my lifestyle because that's the fix for it.
Right.
And which, yes, that's great. And that's very true, but it's also the fix for the diabetes too. So yeah, you just never know kind of what the trigger will be.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, especially as guys, most of us have our wives usually telling us like, hey, you need to like do something. And usually the guy's like, and then like, one of our nurses, her husband, is like, one day their doctor was like, I'm going to put you on medicine for pre-diabetes. And that was a switch. So whatever the switch is, we just have to find it and kind of take advantage. But the idea that I'm just going to wait until it happens, it'll never happen that way.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Which brings me to, so we talk about things that motivate people. I got a bunch of like comments under this section because people were telling me like, okay, well, how did you get going? What made you get better? And one lady on here wrote that the biggest challenge of keeping things going when she starts is she's not seeing any outward results.
Yeah.
But when she came in, metabolically, she was getting much better. But outward results is an issue. And this is the part where I think, Melissa, will kind of incorporate our own story. So Melissa, people like looking at the pounds going down, right? And if they don't see the pounds going down after, say, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, where maybe 10 years ago they would see it come down instantly, they get really frustrated and they stop. But that mindset needs to be maybe adjusted.
Yeah. I mean, we're really not going to see much of any scale change in such a short amount of time. And I think that is discouraging for people, but we really do have to kind of look at, they call them the non-scale victories.
Yeah.
Things like, more energy or feeling stronger or playing with your kids or, your pants fitting differently or your metabolic numbers looking better. A lot of times we'll see changes in those things well before we start seeing any significant change in the scale. But the idea is, we need to be doing this for our overall health and not necessarily that number.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say specifically if exercise was the biggest move, right? If you really want the scale to go down, it is going to be like 80% food.
Right.
So if you're not changing a whole lot of food, maybe choices or portion sizes or things like that, that might not change very much. But if you're going by pure exercise, the other things that you talk about, like your energy being better, your sleep being better, your mood being better, your clothes fitting different, we call body composition changes. That will start happening much earlier than the scale will start moving.
Right.
Yeah. Which, Melissa, let's talk about us. Okay. So you have always been like an aerobic runner. You did cheer in high school and stuff like that, but you've started weight training.
Yeah.
What made that?
I'm getting older. No, yeah, I've always really thrived on cardio. I enjoy it. I've thrived on it. Feel really good, when I'm doing it consistently, all those things. But yeah, as I've gotten older, I'm going to be 40 this year, just for reference. I've just noticed that doesn't change my body as much anymore. Even, it doesn't matter how many miles I was running or anything like that. I just didn't have like the same muscle tone as I used to. And I recognize that, we lose that lean muscle mass when we age. There's just no way around it. So I knew I needed to do something to start building that, to maintain it. So I added some strength training and I started seeing results, and I liked the results, even though I don't really like strength training, but I have come to like it. It's one of those things that it just never really interested me before. But I've come to enjoy it, and I like the results. And so it's become a regular part of my routine.
Yeah. So funny. One of the comments on here, as far as what made him change, was they hung up a mirror.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Yeah. You see, like, you start noticing, you're exactly right. Like, when you're younger, I mean, your body looks very different, and it can change very different. And you hear guys all the time, like, I just eat 2 pizzas and I go to the gym for an hour and it works it off. It's not that way anymore. Things change, right? And so I like what you said, that you can start noticing that, hey, I'm still putting in a lot of effort, but I'm not getting what I'm looking for. And I never heard you say the word pounds moving around.
Right. Yeah. And my weight has been pretty neutral over the years, other than, of course, like having babies and different things like that will make it fluctuate. But my body looks completely different now than, when I was running higher mileage and things like that, even though the scale is really essentially the same.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think you actually don't go to a gym. You have like a small home gym at home, and you don't have a trainer. You just use an app.
Yes,
Yeah.
I use an app. It's called the Moves app, Madeline Moves, if you're looking for something new. But it's just a different workout every day. And I literally just walk from my bedroom to my it's like an office area, but we have turned it into kind of a catch-all room. And my little adjustable weights are in there. I've got bands of different, pounds or whatever, and a bench. And that's what I use. I never have to leave my house. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the beauty of that is just in the simplicity of it, right? You don't have to pay crazy amounts of money to go somewhere. Right. Because, I think any hindrance that we add, any other step, I got to change my clothes to get in my car, and it's cold, so I had to warm up my car, and I got to turn on the heat. Like, anything that we add as a barrier, we as like human beings will not want to do. But if it's as easy as like, I roll out of my bed and I go to my gym and I turn on an app and I just follow the app. I mean, we have gotten to the technology age where it's so simple, we can do it anywhere, anytime.
Right. Yeah. And if I had to get up and, drive to the gym and make the extra time for the trip and then, all that, it wouldn't get done. And I tell people all the time, exercise after kids is way different than it was before.
For sure.
We used to be able to, commit an hour in the gym. Didn't matter if you had to drive 30 minutes round trip or whatever. But with kids, you've got to fit it in where you can. I get up super early and just get it done before the busyness of the day hits.
Yeah.
So, which you do too. You get up early.
Yeah.
And also exercise with an app most days, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I use the Beachbody app. It's $7 a month. I mean, you just can't get any cheaper than $7. And they're all different levels. And so some, in my neighborhood, we have a gym. And so some months I'll go and we'll do a program with the full a lot of weights. But I'll say this, that, when you're younger, and looking back now, when I was younger, I was probably throwing around weights I had no business throwing around, right? Like, it's just, you're like, there's really, really big weights, and you're just going to throw it around and hope you don't get hurt. And that's just, now being closer to 40, that's just not the mindset that we have, or I have anymore. It's all about, right, like, okay, I need to keep up with my kids. My daughter is in gymnastics, and she wants me to do a cartwheel. And, oh my gosh, that's really hard. Or we bought this little air, trail thing for gymnastics. And my daughter's teaching me how to do a vault, like just handstand and fall on your back. And she does it, and she asked me, I'll tell you, that thing didn't have any cushion. I was lying there. It was in the front yard. All the neighbors must be like, that man is crazy. But that's the goal now, to keep up with him. My son plays soccer. He wants to play a lot. And so we're out there playing football. And to do that, you just have to be in a different health side. And again, the mindset now is not like, we're going to get shredded, we're going to get huge, we're going to go compete for whatever reason. But the mindset now is we're just building muscle. You know, we're not trying to burn anything or so. We're just building lean muscle so that we can be as active as we can. And yes, the living longer thing's a great benefit, but you know, the quality of life changes when you're active.
Yeah. And that's the main thing. You know, I've never really worried much about age. And I mean, I guess I'm still not, but you know, entering what is now like, it's truly midlife and it just doesn't feel like it should be, but it is. It has really kind of, you know, given that light to, you know, we're aging and we really just want to feel the best we can for as long as we can. You know, that's the main goal.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. And I think, you know, once you start, it does take, so first of all, a lot of it, you know, take home points. So let's kind of, we all learn to take home points today. Number one, it does have to start with you yourself wanting to start. Like I know my wife, and my wife doesn't usually tell me to work out because I've kind of built this routine, but but it did start with me realizing that if I don't do anything, we'll just kind of keep on keeping on. And living in Mississippi, the trajectory is not a good trajectory, right? The food here, you know, we had drug reps. We don't have it here where we work, but the food that was coming in, the snacks that was coming in, you know, patients being sweet and delivering donuts. I mean, they're all awesome, but I knew that if we didn't change course personally, we were just going to float along, and next thing you know, we'll be part of the statistics that we see. The second thing is it takes a while to form that habit. Most studies say about 2 months to form a really good habit where now when you don't go to the gym or you don't work out, you feel like you feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And once you get to that point, actually it gets easier. Like you're like, yes, I could lay here in bed for another 15 minutes, but I might as well just get up and start my pre-exercise stretches and get going.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And you won't feel any, I mean, even if you slept in that extra like 15, 30 minutes, you're not going to be any like less tired throughout the day. And really, if you get your exercise in, you'll probably be more energetic throughout your day too. So, and yeah, a thought came to mind when we were talking about all this. You know, our routines right now are just a picture in time. You know, wherever you're at in life, it may look very different. My routine has changed dramatically over the years. You know, there were times where I was working, you know, 7 12-hour shifts in a row and, you know, just surviving, you know, it's like one of those things, like different seasons of life, exercise and your routine is going to look different. But if you can have some underlying consistency, that's the main thing. And one thing that may interest you right now may not really fit as well for your body 5 years from now. And that's okay. You know, if you always like picture yourself as, say, you know, the cardio long distance runner or, you know, cyclist or things like that. And then maybe life throws you, you know, in a different direction and you find your interest elsewhere. It's okay to switch it up. And in fact, that's, I think, what keeps things interesting. So.
Perfectly put, Melissa. So, to wrap everything up, because we can talk forever, Melissa. We just hang out. We should have some more guests. We might have. Yeah. So, you know, number one, we don't usually have to worry about exercising too much. Do listen to your body, right? If you're sore, don't keep pushing it. You know, rest days are just as important as exercise days. Number two, you know, the things about using METs to calculate, that will help. The rule of thumb with that is you want to make sure there is some intensity to your activity. There's a difference between just being outside, enjoying outside, and then like mowing the grass and pushing. So just kind of be aware of that. And you can look up these METs things, METS, right on the internet. They'll tell you all about it and things like that. The third thing is it does start with us. Right. You as a person, you know, your physician can tell you everything till the cows come home. You can watch every single social media guy work out. You know, girls are taking videos of themselves working out. You can watch all that. But until you yourself decide that we're going to do something, it's not going to change. Yeah. Starting with small, realistic goals to help build the habit, even if it's just 10 push-ups a day. just to build that habit is really important. And you want something consistent. So something up to maybe 2 months before you really start seeing, like this is something that you do all the time. And then also, don't just look for pounds to change, right? Other things like how your clothes fit, how you feel, right? Your energy, your sleep, your mood, these are all just as important as watching the scale go down.
Yeah.
Perfect. Any closing thoughts, Melissa?
I think that was a good wrap up.
All right. Well, next week will be fun. We'll have a guest on
Yes.
and we'll talk about non-exercise activity things.
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah.